Chapter 39. Liberation Day 3 Vikir. Despite his warnings, Hoeru pushed onward. The DEFCON forces maintained control of the defense grid. After a brutal battle, Madra had finally fallen, but Hoeru's forces had paid a heavy price for his impatience. The ground war had begun, but without any resistance support, it was going to be brutal. If only he understood the vital role the Pygmy clans had played in the liberation of Carmel. So much loss, so much death. He was killing Karzan, who might have been his allies if they could see the big picture, instead of serving as unwitting slaves for their DEFCON masters. Despite his pleas for further aid from the Ronin's mercantile marine allies, no help was coming. Maori may be family, but that changed nothing. He was right. Maintaining their hold over Carmel had to be their priority. It was just a matter of time until DEFCON forces arrived through the Vox Starlink. They'd have a couple days warning. Lady Darkseid couldn't help them without risking being seen as a new Cletharian rampage, which could galvanize the universe against them. It was just a matter of time, and all he could do was watch and wait. Hopefully, Hoeru would find a clear path through the maelstrom with a fire tail to lead the way. Liberation Day 4 Taro. While Wodeo, Roan and Maori were coordinating system defense with Sarah and Jerem, the rest of the Ronin crew had plenty of time to waste. So Taro took it upon herself to arrange an expedition to the surface. Salju was keeping himself busy in the cargo bay, but everyone else seemed eager for a bit of shore leave now that the fighting was over. Even Dizzy was eager to get some sun. It was nice to be home, even if she did have to land at the off-world market in the alien sector, like someone who didn't belong here. Dizzy planned to stay with the shuttle reclining in a lounge chair. Beta offered to stay to keep her company, but her offer was rejected. No surprises there. Beta was quick to vanish into the shadows and was off to cause trouble somewhere else. As long as it was elsewhere, that was fine with her. Ingwin and Audie stuck with her during her trip into the off-world market. She once loved coming here and looking at the strange alien technologies, but now it all looked like second-rate junk. She'd seen it dozens of times through naive eyes. The galaxy was so big with so many marvels. There was really nothing grand about their little bazaar. The novelty and quaintness weren't lost on Audie or Bobtail. Tiara was so embarrassed by it. Her homeworld was so primitive and she'd been blind to it. So many members of the Resistance resented Baron Deloric for turning his back on his home, but it was little more than an insignificant backwater world. He hadn't forgotten it, he'd outgrown it. I expected there to be more people here, Audie commented. All our basic needs are provided for by our clans at our family spires, Taro explained. The Taz Corp General Store takes care of the non-essentials, but you pay for everything there with vouchers. We get a few regular credits for bonuses from time to time, but that's about it. We catch a ride on monthly transports when we have to travel. A bit like wage slaves, Nguyen noted. How do you fund the Resistance? Audie asked. We kinda steal goods from the manufacturing plants. My friend Miyako helps hide the overproduction and uses quality control procedures to hide the rest. We have other ways to get funding too. Jerem is in charge of that. She ships off pygmies who can pass for Cheshire, and they send her back some percentage of their income. I don't know the details. You'd never pass, Bobtail grinned. There's too much wild in you. He started to duck before Taro swung. I don't think she likes you, Audie laughed. Not enough to decide not to keep it, Ingwin taunted. I wasn't in my right mind, Taro glared at him. Bobtail shook his head as they walked from stall to stall. What? Taro snapped. That excuse only works while you're in heat, Ingwin said while ducking again, but she didn't swing at him this time. Taro sighed and muttered, yeah, I guess not. Are you sure you're not a couple? Audie teased. They both emphatically insisted they weren't. Wait, Audie said forcefully as she rushed to her side. What's wrong? Premonition, be quiet and walk with me. Audie snapped, Bobtail, give us some room. He nodded and gave them plenty of space. What? Taro asked. A few steps later Taro heard someone call out her name. Audie went into action before her name had finished exiting Miyako's lips. Her left arm shot in front of her, while her right arm jutted out to her side to protect Taro from the impact of his leap. The air distorted in front of her, sending Miyako toppling onto the ground. Why did you? Taro stammered. Friend of yours. Audie shrugged. I have precognition. He was going to knock you down. I was protecting the baby. He should only be out for a few minutes. Wait, did you do that to me? Taro growled. I was out for over a day. Yeah, she got you good, Ingwin laughed. It usually just lasts a few minutes. She was probably just sleep deprived, Audie insisted. Yeah, sure, Taro said meekly. Maybe that was it. Taro accepted the lie because it was much more comfortable than the truth. The little subterran woman augmented to have cat-like features really had bested her. She hoped Miyako would be unconscious for long enough for her to decide how to break the news to him. She'd promised to be with him during her first heat. Her body had broken that promise. This happened. It wasn't anyone's fault. As Desiree would say, it is part of being a Karzan. It was just biology. You look nervous, Tiaro. You're all jittery, Bobtail said. That's not the guy you told me about, is it? Yeah, she replied while wringing her hands. Really? Not what I expected. Ngwen said. What's that supposed to mean? Tro snapped. Because he's not at all like Ngwen. He's kinda cute, Audie laughed. No, that's not it, Bobtail smirked. She said he's Clan Firetail. I guess I just expected him to be more red. Can you even see red? Audie scoffed. If you want, I can talk to him, Ngwen offered, ignoring Audie entirely. You know, man to cub. She hesitated. Tro. I'm thinking. Try not to hurt yourself, Beta snickered as she stepped out from under a table. Stop giving me that look. I brought the smelling salts. It's not a party without them. Right here, Audie said as she held out her hand. Beta handed off the packet then disappeared back under the table. Do you ever get used to that? Tro scowled. I served with her on the Baron's ship for a few years. Ngwen shrugged. There were a lot more places to hide on a ship that big. Do yourself a favor. Stop trying to get used to her and just accept it. Pashai are creepy little shadow monkeys. Every last one of them. With good ears, Tro smirked as she heard faint, distant giggling. Are you ready for me to wake up your cute little friend? Audie asked playfully. Give her some time. She's still deciding if she wants me to talk to him first, Bobtail grumbled irritably. It's just a matter of time before he wakes up on his own, Audie countered. Smelling salts just give us some control over when. Panic welled up inside of her. Audie was a Terran with feline features including ears. She may be the closest person to Miako's ideal woman. Tro had always been supportive of his weird kink, until Lady Kali of the Darkseed clan indulged his weird fantasies. How would he react? Would he choose Audie over her? Would he reject her if he knew she spent her first heat with and planned to have her first litter with someone else? She began hyperventilating. Bobtail rested his hand on her shoulder. Do you need me to talk to him? Can you be here when I tell him? Tro pled. It's fine if, Audie started to say. Him not you, Tro whined. I don't want Miako anywhere near you. Fine, she said as she handed Ngwen the packet of smelling salts and walked off in disgust. No, Tro pouted. You can talk it out with her later, Bobtail reassured her as he cracked open the smelling salts. Are you ready to do this? No, Tro whimpered pitifully. You can do this, Ngwen soothed. What if he hates me for? For being a Karzan? Bobtail scoffed. You know I started off my life as an actual slave, right? They caged me from time to time, medicated me, even clipped my tail to make sure I couldn't jump over the walls. But not once did they ever forget I was Karzan. If he has less respect for your nature than my captors did. But I love him, she insisted. If he loves you too, he'll let you be you. We're not in love, but I respect you enough to accept you, even you were born with a penis. Tro lowered her head in embarrassment. You noticed? It's technically an enlarged clitoris and my parents had it removed when I was really young. I don't remember having it. Scar tissue's there, he shrugged. Give the guy a chance, okay? Okay, she said softly. I think I'm ready. Summary. We decided to just call her Cass to make it easier for the twins to pronounce, and it was still close to her birth name. Sam didn't like referring to her using a term that meant trash. Deciding on a new surname was much more important. If the circumstances of her mother's impregnation were discovered, it would be problematic enough, but she was a survivor of the Drolfage childhood ailment. She was supposed to be destroyed in accordance with Lamentic law. She was spared because her mother refused to appoint the task to an executioner. Gainon's solution was to seal away the child in a top security facility, and insist none of the workers care for her or acknowledge her existence. They were just waiting for her to die because Lamentics don't kill Lamentics. Highly ranked executioners, working under the direction of the Zarina, were the exception. The task of an executioner could be assigned by any member of the High Court. They could even temporarily grant a person the role for a single action like Hina. Acetal was Gainon's sister, the mother of Cass and the Zarina. Despite her role and responsibilities, Acetal was unwilling to appoint an executioner to do the deed. If news of this ever got out, she could be removed from her station. That little girl's continued existence could cause the downfall of the Lamentic Empire. No one could ever know she was born to house Almatin. Sam agreed to change her name and shelter her as a ward of Cletheria. Samri was still affiliated with House Ilaru. That would have to change too or risk making enemies of Akia's house. Poor little Cass had rolled poorly in the game of fates. She needed to give her a name that wouldn't burden her further and change her own surname in the process. During the last years of the Eldaron Empire, Clotharia was active in Dayron space, but there weren't many surviving records from that time period, which was advantageous to her. She reclaimed her family name from her life as Kayla and shared it with her newly adopted daughter. Being Samari and Cass Visala was a nice tribute to Kayla's mother, Valkyr Visala. Near the Dew Star Nebula, there was a brief delay at the Lamentic blockade. Oleander was still stuck in Nazguli territory, which meant his forces were stuck in the area until receiving further orders. That might be helpful to the Karzon, but it was a political mess. It was a major shipping corridor, and as long as Clotharia held the Stargate, Tazcorp needed access to that slipstream to maintain their shipping schedules. The network of Starlinks was strategically placed, but without the gate to function as its backbone, it would be a logistical nightmare. She knew the nearest Clotharian fleet, with Louis at the helm, was still on its way back from exterminating a Xynon colony. Dealing with Kalmia was exhausting, even with the Nautiloids and Darklings doing the heavy lifting. She could tell they were hiding something from Kali and herself. She considered asking her sister self to take control of the fleet in the Fellowship region. But was that even what they were to each other anymore? How long could this division of work really be sustained without a rivalry dividing them? Sam buried her concerns. If they could share a body with minimal friction, certainly they could do this. She received several messages from Tyrell before docking with the Kirame. T-Arwa's ship, the Mongoose, was ready. The software upgrades were complete and the jump sled fitting was complete. Gowry's ship, the Kachinas, or was left of it, was stranded at the Vox Starlink. She desperately needed fuel and repairs. He was unsure what to do about it. The Port Authority was insisting on a prompt reply. She was stuck mid-fold. She'd locked up the Starlink for over an hour. Gowry was apparently asking to be towed to the Echelon system for repairs, but couldn't afford the tug fee. She was probably pursuing Syntholo again and had abandoned the pygmy Karzon tech crew. She asked Tyrell to forward the message to Gowroon and ask him to deal with it. The Echelon system was his project. They'd have to cover the towing cost and Starlink lockup fees. Sam considered leaving her to die in space, but decided to leave her fate to Tyrell and Gowroon. Zika was driving everyone on the station crazy. He'd somehow gotten it into his head that he'd been abandoned by both her and Yuri. Tyrell's recommended resolution was to take him for a ride after dropping off Yuri and deliver T-Arwa's ship while she's out. Apparently, the inevitable, who can maintain physical contact with Cass longer competition would have to wait. After docking at the array, the Mongoose was loaded into the cargo area of the Regicide 2. It was a tight fit with the added tonnage of the jump sled attachment. They'd had to leave the shuttle behind, but they managed. Tyrell's salvage crew was still in the Carmel area and could simply be instructed to send over one of their shuttles to the crew section airlock to assist. After trading out the harness to Ziku, she left Yuri behind at the array and headed back to the slipstream. Cass was determined to stay with her instead of staying behind to keep him company. The climate control system on the array kept the temperature within a tolerable range for them with NAC assistance, but there were only a few areas they could go, such as the loading dock, if they overexerted themselves and became overheated. Whenever Tyrell wanted them out of an area he was busy working in, all he had to do was adjust the temperature, which would be ineffective while they were wearing the harness. Right now they only had one. Hopefully sharing a bit of Sam's Mystrionic specialty would help Ziku further compensate so they wouldn't need another. Tyrell would just have to find a more direct means of discouraging them from distracting him. Sam spent the majority of the slipstream ride focused on Ziku's training while Cass sat in the corner and watched. He was able to create force walls easy enough, but had difficulties forming them without set anchor points and so was unable to warp them to make the curves required to form arches. Without being able to take that initial step, he'd never be able to form force bubbles. In the process, she learned more about Cass. Ziku was nervous around her at first, just like his brother had been, but that settled down as she continued to watch him. This wasn't so much a matter of him getting used to her, but Cass's comfort level with him. Sam wished she had Kali's Eldaroni eyes. It would certainly have made this a lot easier to figure out. She suspected Cass had some form defense mechanism that was triggering a fear response. This wasn't a normal trait for Lamentics or Lampharians. The bartender at Yarrow's said she was half Lamentic. Sam kept wondering what the other half was. She walked unervingly quietly, and her fingernails were abnormally long and durable. Lamentics don't have claws and neither did anything they were genetically compatible with. Cass's claws might be small and worn, but they were definitely there. Was this a side effect of surviving Drolfage? She was born, not cloned. Samari knew that much, so what was she? There was no point in asking. She hadn't even known she was a girl until a day ago, and explaining what that meant was deeply culturally dependent. Samari wasn't ready to explain it beyond the simple linguistic elements. In Lamentic terms, it came down to whether mare had a short or long a sound. They all headed to the bridge as a tone sounded notifying them that they were diverting to Karzon space. The Regicide 2 was a hunter-killer class ship and wouldn't show up on most sensors with its advanced cloaking technology. She may have considered Vakir an ally but knew better than to startle him, especially with all those mercantile marine ships in the area. It just wasn't worth the risk. He had her ship's communication identifier. Hopefully that would be enough for him. She didn't want to take the time and effort to explain how and why she had a new body. Proving she was who she claimed would be simpler if she were dealing with Tiara, Miyako or Jerem. They'd spent more time talking with her than he had. Tiara would be the easiest. She'd spent time with the twins. Zika was looking forward to seeing the little Karzan woman again, or more specifically making his brother jealous afterwards. They might be bratty from time to time, but they were her brats. After stepping off the elevator onto the bridge, Sam walked over and sat at the helm while the kids ran around the room playing. Just once it would be nice if Cass didn't have to pretend to be the monster. It didn't seem fair. She may be faster than him, but her movements weren't as fluid. Maybe Zika was worried about hurting her because she was so much smaller than him? Sam finished composing her message to Vikir, informing him that she'd be visiting the area in a few hours and intended to drop off Tiara's ship while she was there. He sent her back a message after a short delay apprising her of the situation. Samari frowned. He understood why she couldn't send any ships to help Horu, but didn't seem to fully understand why the Karzan had to fight their own battle. It wasn't simply a matter of satisfying their racial pride. She just didn't have a ground army at her disposal. Tanks might be an option but would take time to build and deploy, and would still require Karzan trained to use them. They needed help now, not long-term solutions. Samari deactivated the stealth system as they continued further into the system. She contacted the station to coordinate the mongoose delivery. Jerem was in a meeting, so they patched through to the ship Tiara was traveling on. The majority of the crew wasn't there, but a dock worker named Salju agreed to help her with transferring the ship. "Sit down," Sam said. "I'm going to have to switch to manual control for a few minutes. Tiara is a good pilot." "So is Oleander," Sam smirked, "but they're not here. You're stuck with me and I need to be able to concentrate." She slowed the ship and adjusted the rotation to match the movements of the Ronin. She could feel the impact of the tow cable, and fired the forward thrusters in short bursts until she received confirmation the mongoose was free of the cargo bay. She sent a message to the Ronin thanking Salju for his help before continuing on her way. A few minutes later she entered into orbit and enabled the autonav system. The kids were getting restless, but she had one last call to make, to the captain of Tyrell's salvage team on the Atraxia 973. The captain was unwilling to accept any communication that wasn't direct link with video. She imagined Captain Mel was probably some fat greasy Shamfarian guy whose hands would stay just off camera the whole time. She wasn't happy about it but didn't have much of a choice. Grudgingly Sam opened the connection. A young woman with short pink hair answered. "Get Captain Mel," Sam grumbled. "That's me," the woman said with a big smile. "It's short for Melody." "Really?" Samari said. "After you insisted on a video call. Never mind. It's nice to meet you. I have to ask about your hair." She was about to ask if it was natural and follow up by asking if she was Lamfarian, but Mel didn't give her the chance. "Oh, I'm actually a blonde. The boss insisted I start dyeing it. It's weird, but if he's willing to pay me extra if I dye my hair, that's fine by me. I expected to have to put up with all sorts of weirdness, but most of our communication is text-based," Mel said with a shrug. "I heard he answers to you. Do you know why?" "I do," Samari snickered. "It's pretty sneaky of him actually. Let's just call it plausible deniability. You're not the only person he could call Pinky." "Who else?" Mel asked. "Someone that would probably kill him if she knew he called her that," Samari laughed. "So, you need a lift to the surface?" "Yeah. I had to drop off a ship and didn't have room for a shuttle. Jump space mass limitations are a real hassle." "No kidding," Mel chuckled. "There's a reason salvage ships don't usually come equipped with jump drives. Forget to carry a one and you're going to have a short trip." "So, can you spare a shuttle with enough room for 3 passengers, one roughly Gorgalian-sized?" "Sure," Mel said. "Most of the crew's busy breaking down scrap, but we can spare the ship telepath. We call him Flotsam." "How many times do I have to tell you I prefer Jetsam?" someone off-screen complained. "It's all space trash to me," Mel smiled. "Take Shuttle 2 and rendezvous with them. Their ship is registered as Regicide 2. What's that look for? Fine, it's in order. Now get off your useless ass and earn your keep." "He'll be over soon," Mel said apologetically, then disconnected. "All ashore that's coming ashore," Samari giggled as she led them back onto the elevator. After returning to the crew deck, she asked them to wait outside while she retrieved something from Thalu's old vault. They weren't very cooperative. Zika couldn't fit through the doorway anyway, but Cass snuck in behind her. As Kayla, she may not have known much about its contents, but Sam's memories were a big help. Thalu must have raided several ancient vaults to amass these treasures. It made her wonder what Thalu had in those crates that had been stored by the hilltop house on Hyrule. What could have been so valuable to her? Thalu defied Labarth's orders despite his warnings. It cost her life. Kayla's memories of scrubbing the woman's remains from the shuttle console remained as painful as they were vivid. Cass, don't touch that, Somri snapped. Cass swiftly withdrew her hand from the drawer. I'm sorry, she whimpered. Some of the things in here can be very dangerous, Sam soothed. I don't know all your abilities yet. I just don't want you to get hurt. Sam grabbed a leather band and inserted a light blue rune-engraved stone into a Mystrium setting. Ziku, put this on. It will bolster your ice-based Mystrionic abilities. It'll work as long as that stone is touching your skin, okay? Is there going to be a fight, Mama? Ziku asked excitedly. No, Somri scoffed. I've never been on Carmel. I don't know what the environment's like down there. I don't know if that harness will be enough. I just want to make sure you're safe. Okay, Mama. He lowered his head and rolled his shoulders forward as he spoke, but his fingers were twitching. This was the first time he'd ever tried lying to her through his body language. I mean it, she scolded. No fighting. But Mama, he whined, you let Yuri fight a big monster. I did not, Sam said irritably. I wasn't even there. Gaurun sent 3 highly trained Gorgalians and let Yuri tag along. The harness Oleander's crew made for him broke. He could have died. I don't want to risk that happening again. Take the damn charm. Sorry, Mama, he said while taking the band from her. Cass, Somri said. She shoved something into a drawer and closed it while trying to look innocent. Let's go, Sam smirked. She hadn't actually seen her take it, but she was smiling and had been too quiet. After securing the vault, they headed to the airlock where she expected the pilot would be waiting, but the shuttle still hadn't arrived. The Atraxia 973 was programmed into the ship, but Mel's ship wasn't in her personal contact list. She'd have to head back to the bridge to ask about the delay. She helped adjust Ziku's strap while they waited. His complaints about being fussed over kept Cass entertained. She'd move on to adjusting the positioning of Cass's mask by the time the shuttle finally arrived. Somri had hoped teaching her how to apply cover-up would be enough, but those cracks in her face absorbed it within a half hour. She'd just have to wear that mask until Somri could find a product that worked. She expected the shuttle driver to be shocked to see a Jagaltim, but they weren't. They seemed more surprised by her and Cass. He was a fairly average-looking Shamfarian, a few years younger than herself, probably early 20s. He didn't bother introducing himself, which didn't seem too odd. Melody had taken care of that. The ride down to the surface was awkward. If Cass's defense mechanism had a dial, it had to be at its highest setting. Even Sam was getting a little nervous, but the pilot just kept trying to talk to Cass. A person paying so much attention to a child that spent their life deliberately not being seen had to be uncomfortable. Zika seemed fidgety too. Something in his body language was off. At one point it looked like he was about to hit the pilot. Somri was happy that he'd taken enough of a liking to his new sister that he had the impulse to hit a man who was clearly making her uncomfortable. By the time they landed, Somri had decided he was a real creeper, and told him to head back to Mel's ship. She'd just arrange other transit back, even if it meant asking them to send a shuttle down from Vikir's flagship. Hey, I never could tell which of you is which, the driver said as they were coming in for a landing, directing his attention to Ziku. He's the green one, Cass said in the Lamentic tongue, angrily enough that it would be reasonable to assume her words were laced with profanity. Despite the discomfort, some good did come from the ride. Mystrionics gave off a green glow. Cass must be able to see it, otherwise why would she have said that? The question remained, could she see auras like Lupian's, or was it something else like Eldrani eyes? There might still be some remnants of that in the Lamentic genome, although she'd never heard of it. After the door had closed, Zika spent a little extra time near the shuttle before it left. Several species could sense the activation of knacks. With training and practice they could learn to distinguish which knack it was, but it was a feeling. They couldn't actually see it. Lupians could see faint auras around everyone, but they were the only species she had ever heard of that could. There were ways to emulate the ability with knacks, but it just wasn't the same. Power activation, changes in emotional states, even some illnesses were visible to Lupians. They just needed to learn to recognize what they were looking at. Lupians couldn't interbreed with any other species though. Well, maybe Maiko. She really didn't know much about them, but probably not. Somri gave up on trying to figure out what had sired Cass. It really didn't matter, but a hint of what to expect would be nice. Yuri was grinning broadly with his arms swinging freely as he walked over to them. Thank you, Mama. It works good. What did you do? Sam asked. I made the door freeze, he answered proudly. Why? Sam asked. Mama got mad with me after I fed Shiny Ball to Shelly. Then Mama leave Shinji gave me a different ball. I hate Shinji, Ziku snarled. Shinji? That was Shinji, Sam said in disgust, wondering what she ever saw in him. Never mind. Let's get going. Mama, Ziku said mournfully, I promised to take better care of Cass so she doesn't outgrow her shell too. Taking care of her is my responsibility, not yours, Sam started, but seeing the deepening sorrow in his dark eyes added, "But I'll still let you help sometimes." There were only 3 landing pads, 2 of which were empty now that her ride was gone. There was no sign of a starport and there weren't many buildings in the area. A walkway led to what looked like an outdoor market. There was a black church testing facility which was closed and a couple small stores, most of which were TazCorp subsidiaries. There was a Terran-looking woman sunning herself in a lounge chair next to the remaining shuttle. She wasn't Dareth, Darien, Udbar or Lampharian. That much was obvious from the color of her skin. The shape of her eyes wasn't right for a Shampharian, her proportional balance was out of sync so she couldn't be Sumerium. So maybe? No, they were the Frylius subterran species. The musculature was all wrong. No, it couldn't be, she thought, but she's wearing a pirate's hat. Did Baron Deloric ever visit that planet? I don't like being stared at, the woman said irritably, and that goes double for the crotch goblin behind you. I was just wondering what an E2 was doing out this far, Somri shrugged. I'm not an E2, the woman snickered. Then what? Sam started but was interrupted the moment she started to speak. Do you see any wings? E2 don't have. Sam began. Neither do I, the woman scoffed. So what makes you think I'm your personal exposition fairy? Apashai stepped out of the shadows behind her chair. Don't mind me. Just grabbing some smelling salts. I remember you, Zika said happily. Your little beta. Nope, just another Pashai, she said while rummaging through external compartment on the side of the shuttle. Not with those patterns, he laughed. You can't fool me. Jagaltim can see all the black colors. Too busy to play with you, Beta said. Odi again, the lounging woman asked. Yeah, but don't worry, it wasn't a repeat performance with Tiaro. Found it. I'll try not to interrupt you again. She flashed a look at Somri before vanishing into a nearby shadow. I guess I'll be on my and go look for Tiaro, Sam said. I see them, Zika said as he started walking. They're over there. Sam and Cass followed his lead. When did you meet her? Sam asked. After you leave with Yari and White Long Name Guy. Oleander, Somri sighed. Longer. Sam paused to consider. Fleet Admiral Oleander Orwell Atom. Words yes, but order changes sometimes. It confuses me. Ignore the other words, Sam chuckled softly. Oleander is all that matters. Sam blushed. That didn't sound right, but rewording would just draw more attention to it. She fidgeted with her oath ring as they continued to walk. She was visiting Miako's homeworld and she still couldn't stop thinking about him. Then again, felines of any species were far from monogamous. And the same could be said for Oleander. A pair of pygmy Karzon, one without a tail, were gathered near a third with tan fur who was laying prone. She didn't expect to see a tailless Cheshire standing nearby, though the legs were wrong. She was a Terran who had undergone extreme body augmentation. Do you know who she is? Sam asked, motioning to the unusual-looking woman. I remember her. That's Audie, Zika said with the enthusiasm of a student who knew the answer and had just been called on by their teacher in class. Poor TR must be losing her mind over that one. Talk about competition. Jerem was hoping they'd breed once the little Miss Frosttail was ready, but Audie was the happy medium. Mama Sam, Cass said while holding out her mask, I think it stopped again. I didn't understand. Zika's translation module was built into his headset. It should still have a nearly full charge. Tyrell could have set one up for Cass, but this was better for now. There were a lot of words she didn't want Cass exposed to yet. Already? Okay, I'll recast it for you. It will just take a minute or two. Sam stopped to focus on the mask. Can I go say hi to TRO? Zika asked. Go on, Sam said with a smile. What, do you think I wanted this? It was my first heat. Do you think I planned this? She heard TRO roaring. Sam took her time getting the mask ready. She really didn't want to explain this to Cass. She couldn't make out his response, but it clearly wasn't good. The gray-furred pygmy had positioned himself between them. Zika reached out a hand and scooped her up, resting her on one of his broad shoulders, and leaning his head away from them as she continued yelling. Yes, I'm keeping it, TRO ranted, and I don't care what anyone's opinion is. You've been with how many of your sisters when they've had their first heat, and I've stood by you each time. I even took you when you wanted to indulge your perversion and had sex with some Terran. Sorry, Audie. No offense, TRO added more calmly as an afterthought. It's fine, Audie laughed. I didn't fuck him. I have standards. Somri handed the mask to Cass while deciding how offended she should be. He was so shy and adorable back then. Full of all that nervous energy. Was all that an act? No, his mother was there with him and asked some awkward questions. It was a fantasy he'd never been able to act out. His mother thanked her for giving him back his confidence. Is that what confidence looks like for a Karzon? Sam grumbled. The males calm down after they get a few more whiskers, Beta chuckled as she stepped out from under a stall. Their lifespan is only around 60. They hit breeding age as early as 6, can live up to 60, but tend to die before 30, mostly from pride, overconfidence, or some other form of testosterone poisoning. Just males. Sam snickered. There was a crash in the distance as the two male pygmies started brawling. Of course. It's estrogen poisoning the girls have to worry about. Mama Sam says I'm a girl. What's that? Cass asked nervously. Beta glanced at her. You're a lamentic, right? Cass nodded. How old is she? About 3, Sam said cautiously. You'll be 10 before you have to worry about anything like that, Beta said reassuringly while reaching out her hand. She touched her shoulder before Samari had a chance to caution her. Beta pulled back her hand and shook it as if she'd been stung. It's okay. You have nothing to worry about, the Pashai reassured her. Samari noticed Cass at her age was already a head taller. So, you're a friend of the Zaggy? He's one of my kids, Samari answered swiftly to ensure the woman didn't have time to comment. She's 2. I have the habit of collecting strays. I stopped by to deliver Tiaro's ship. It's finished. That's great. I'm Beta, the Ronin's official medical office and less official knack trainer, she said while holding out her hand. Are you with the Black Church? Sam asked while holding her but before shaking it. I did say unofficial, right? He grinned. Do you know how to conduct a knack test? Sam asked. On who? Her. She's a hybrid. Do you know how to pick a lock? Beta's grin broadened. I think I can arrange something. Samari smiled. I'm Samari, Sam for short. They shook hands. Do you think we should? Sam started to ask then reconsidered. Trust me. They'll be busy. It takes a while to work out that much possessiveness, Beta said dismissively. Back when she served Akia, Samari had entered her share of Black Church facilities without proper authorization. There were mystic seals on the safe, vault, and library, but this was just the front door to a public testing facility, not even a proper branch office. She didn't even need to crack the lock this time. Just enter in the location ID on a pin pad, which was fairly universal. She entered the world coordinates relative to the closest major site, which was Hyrule, on a pin pad, and the door opened right up. The first test was gripping onto a Mystrium sphere and checking for a reaction. Cass was Mystrium reactive but not very. Beta guessed she'd be rated less or minor at best. The second step was determining how her knack manifested. Are you trying to find out if she has something naturally occurring? Beta asked. If she's a hybrid it's possible I guess, but they use soul stones for a reason. Expect disappointment. She's not Lemfarian if that's what you're thinking. I don't know what her father was. She doesn't have soul touch. Instead she hurts anyone she touches. She makes people afraid of her reflexively. Her nails are like little claws and I think she can see auras. Honestly, I don't know what to expect, Sam said with an exasperated sigh. I suspect she has a dark force knack but I'm not even sure of that. I don't have it but a friend of mine does. I don't know how much help he'll be. It may just be a side effect of surviving Drolfage. You both survived the Samsaran plague, Beta sounded shocked, and you don't have a dark force knack? No, Sam scoffed, Drolfage. It's a lamentic childhood. Samsaran plague, Beta interrupted. Pashai can live over 1,000 years. I'm not that old but I know enough. Why do you think they keep their kids isolated for their first year? It mutates fast and adapts to new species quick. Drolfage is the same damn thing as the Samsaran plague. Jumped to them a few hundred years ago. They never did admit it but I'm a doctor or at least was. I know these things. It hit my ancestors too a long time ago. It nearly wiped us out. Might have if it wasn't for the colonies. You want to know what the survivors had in common? A knack for dark force. Hardly any of my people had that one when it hit us. Now it's around 1 in 10. Cass was giggling. She clearly didn't understand. I'm sorry, Sam stammered. I said she survived, not both of us. The Pashai struggled to regain her composure. Cass looked at Beta angrily as she took the sphere from her. Do you mind if I take a closer look at her cheek? Beta asked as she handed Cass something else to distract her. She won't be able to understand you without the mask, Sam said, but if she's fine with it so am I. Beta talked quietly with Cass while adjusting the position of her mask. It sounded like things were starting to calm down out there. Samari walked to the door to take a peek through the side of the curtain. Tiara was sitting on Zika's shoulder with his neck between her legs while he held the boys out in front of himself, one in each hand. It looked like the fight had just been broken up. Tiara was wagging her finger and giving them a piece of her mind. Even with the harness on, his body temperature was still higher than most. He probably made a great natural heating pad. Yuri could enhance his strength with Kobe Tamsh, which made him much stronger than his brother. Zika didn't get to show off that often and he did look like he was enjoying himself. It will be fine, just show me, she heard Beta saying. But she said not to make them, Cass said while covering her cheek with her hand. I said not without my permission, Samri corrected. It's all right this time. Go ahead. Cass carefully traced the cracks on the left side of her face, collecting the black ichor into a putrid mass which she rolled into a ball between her thumb and pinky. She lowered the ball into the palm of her right hand and asked, "What should I have it say?" Sam shrugged. "I don't know. Whatever you want." Cass cupped her hands and whispered into them. She closed her hands, twisted her palms against each other, then separated them, exposing the black moth-like creature that had formed between them. As she lowered her hands, it took flight and came to rest on Beta's ear. A moment later it was gone in a puff of ashen smoke. "Thank you," Beta said with a smile. "You have pretty eyes too." Somri hadn't expected Cass to compliment the woman's glowing red eyes, but it seemed to be well received. "Wait here and play while I talk to your mother," Beta said with a warm smile. Cass nodded as the woman bounced away. Once she was confident Cass wasn't paying attention, Beta began speaking quietly. "The fidgets aren't reacting. She has no additional knacks. Her dark force knack is pretty weak. If you're lucky she won't get any stronger as she grows up. For good measure keep to the basics if you have her taught." "Why?" Sam asked. "Her little butterfly has mass. That's not a normal dark force ability. It's a summon. She can't keep it here long. If you're lucky that's all she'll be able to manifest. Oh, and I think I may have an idea what her other half is." "Really? What?" Sam asked. "That woman you met earlier on the landing pad isn't always a woman. They were male when I first met them on the E2 homeworld. They're a shapeshifter that can take any Terran form they're familiar enough with. She snuck on the Baron's ship when we were in the area. They're capable of reproducing with most Terrans but offspring is rare. Lamentics aren't Terran but their morphology is close and they can breed with some. The father may have been a Dujari. Dizzy doesn't have it but dark force does run in the population. It would explain a few things. Maybe not all but the results of crossbreeding can be unpredictable." Somri smirked. "It's a better explanation than none," the woman shrugged. "About that plague your people are pretty rare. I take it the population never recovered. We have large infrequent litters and mate for life. Well the women do at least," Beta rolled her eyes. "I met a Pashai who called himself Gideon Spade a few years back. He offered to introduce one of his sisters to the guy who used to have the job." "More than one? Must be nice," Beta smirked. "We're a rarity these days. Most males have to resort to going interspecies, or self-service to get their needs met." "Is that why you seem a bit down on men?" "Try being born into a population that's around 70% male sometime," she grumbled. "You'll understand." "At least you have plenty of options," Somri said weakly. "What you get is way too much attention all competing for one thing," she smirked. "Speaking of obnoxious guys would you mind dropping me off at my ship when you go? I wasn't really happy with the shuttle pilot who brought me here." "It'll cost you," Beta grinned. "I'm sure I can afford it," Somri snickered. "Actually no charge. I have a better idea," Beta grinned. "How about free repairs whenever we're in the area? If you don't mind waiting in line behind the Lamentic fleet and any paying customers, and aren't planning on eating our food or using our facilities." "I know how to take a hint," Beta sighed. "One-time emergency repairs then and we skip to the front of the queue." "Sure," Sam said then called over to Cass. "It's time to get moving." While adjusting her mask, Sam noted that the fissures on the side of Cass' face looked different. The pattern had changed. They didn't look as deep but looked more damp than usual. This was the result of drawing out goop to make a butterfly. What would happen if she drew out more? Could be dangerous or even fatal. Had she just adapted to living with Drollfage? Had it somehow become part of her? It had ravaged the Echelon system numerous times, drove the Pasha to near extinction, and, if the Cletharian collective memories were accurate, was the same illness that devastated Kalmia during their war with the Lamentics long ago. It wasn't contagious. That's all that really mattered. "I think you're a little taller today," Sam said quietly. Half-breed or not, Cass was growing at the same rate as a Lamentic, which would physically make her about the equivalent of a 9-year-old in Terran terms, but emotionally she'd be around 7 if she hadn't been developmentally delayed. "I'm not," Cass said defiantly. "Ziku's shorter." Sam smiled. He wasn't. She might have taken Sam too literally when she told her not to be in a rush to grow up. Somri endured the pain as she tousled Cass' hair. Either she was getting used to it or it hurt less today, Sam wasn't sure which. Ziku had let go of the boys and Tro was climbing down from his shoulders as they approached. Cass giggled as she ran past Sam's outstretched arms yelling, "Ziku, I'm going to get you." Ziku ran. She pursued. "Is that normal?" Beta asked. "Normal." Somri smiled. "I don't know what that means anymore." "Hey Tro," Sam said. "The mongoose repairs are done. We just dropped it off. We threw in a jump sled so you don't get stranded again." "So did Ziku come with you?" Tro said with a note of confusion and curiosity. "He said he came with me," Somri interrupted. "Like the new look?" Sam turned around as if she was modeling new clothes. "Sure," Tro said with obvious confusion. "Somri, that's Audie Vega and Nguyen Bobtail." Miyako tried to introduce himself but she ignored him. It's nice to meet both of you, Sam said with a smile. I'm the owner of that array you stopped at. Sorry I wasn't there to greet you. I was traveling when you stopped by. Oh, Taro's eyes widened. It's you. You really have changed. For the better I hope, Sam laughed. Miyako seemed to be having difficulties deciding who to stare at. That's a lot of augmentation. It must be a major commitment, Sam remarked as she sauntered over to Audie. Have you given any thought to a tail? Most tail augments are just decorative. They just hang there like a flaccid dick, Audie grumbled. I can't afford to have a spinal extension. Now that's a major commitment of both time and credits, and only the Gyrons will do it. Hey Sam asked while motioning toward her ears. Sure, just don't tug them, it feels weird. Audie giggled. Miyako wandered off at some point while she was examining Audie's ears and fine fur. My old body had prehensile tails, Sam said. I miss them sometimes. Tails? More than one. Audie looked skeptical. Lady Kayla of Clan Darkseed had 3. Were you really her? Taro asked cautiously. 2 souls, 1 body, Sam said. It was a little crowded in there at times, but honestly. He paused, not sure what to say. She could feel her sister's soul out in the collective and she had plenty of other people in her life. I think I like it, Sam concluded. Liberation Day 5 Gowrie. The last time she dropped out of jump space she must have miscalculated. Her trillium reserves were depleted more than she anticipated. Either she dumped too much fuel to cool the engine or there was a leak. She'd charged for the link hoping to make it through in the wake of a heavy corporate transport, hoping the gravitational force of the ship's mass would be sufficient to carry the Kachinas though the Starlink. It might have worked too if they hadn't made a last-minute course correction. She was stranded about halfway through the Starlink in the middle of folded space. Despite still being in one piece, the nose of the ship was thousands of light years from the aft, and the port authorities from both sides of the link were screaming at her over comms. Hull integrity was down another 14%, holding at 26 for now, but that would change as soon as she tried to move. She was stuck and running out of options. She'd already tried contacting Tyrell and Lady Darkseed, knowing it would take days for them to send help. Ferrying her through without destroying the ship would take a tug crew time and experience, none of which she could afford. The ship shifted with the fold. It wasn't easy to interpret the scanners, but it looked like a ship at the Vox Starlink had just rammed the Kachinas. Someone from the port authority was urging for patience, cautioning that destroying her ship could damage the Starlink and informing them that they'd be billed for the repairs. They insisted that they'd resolve the issue in a timely manner. It had already been over 2 hours. Hull integrity 24%. Gowrie wondered how they defined timely. If they were in such a rush they could pay for. The ship groaned. Hull integrity 23%. It was just a matter of time until her ship gave out entirely, but she didn't know how much more of this she could take. A light on the console flashed. She answered the call, desperately hoping it was Tyrell calling to let her know he'd found a way to save her. Hello Crow, Gowroon's voice hissed. You already ripped one of my wings off. Haven't you done enough? Are you hoping to hear me die? I won't give you that satisfaction. After you bit me, Gowroon sneered. Gowrie disconnected. 20 minutes later she received a text-only message from someone called Grax with directions to use an escape pod and to make sure to bring 2 days' food. The chances of anyone finding a pod in space were remote, but they had the right transponder code. And the hull integrity was at 14%. Gowrie had never heard of them but decided to follow their instructions. She had no other options and the hull was starting to buckle.